Away you go.
Hi everybody, welcome to Nottinghamshire and City of Nottingham Fire and Rescue Authority Policy and Strategy Committee on Friday the 30th of April, 10 a.m. start. We've got a few items today which will be dealt with in public session, and then there is an item which we will be moving into private session for. Welcome to those who are listening or watching online or watching the meeting back. I'm Councillor Michael Payne, Chair of the Fire Authority and Chair of this committee. Members on the meeting today here with me are Councillor Toby Neal, Vice Chair of the Fire Authority, Councillor Andrew Brown, Lead Spokesperson for the Opposition Group on the Fire Authority, Councillor Jonathan Wheeler, who's a County Council member on the Authority, Councillor Sybil Fielding, who is a County Council member on the Authority, and Councillor John Clark, who is also a County Council member on the Authority and Chair of our Finance and Resources Committee. With us on the call today as well, we've got officers supporting the committee. So the Chief Fire Officer, John Buckley, is on the call with us. Becky Smethers is with us, who is our Head of Finance. Our Assistant Chief Fire Officer, Candida Brudenell, is also on the call supporting the committee today. The clerk of the independent clerk of the Fire Authority is also with us, Malcolm Townrow. Gavin Harris is in the background, making sure that everything goes into order in terms of being an online meeting. And thank you to Phil Y as well, who is clerk in today's meeting. Okay, so I'll move into the order of business. The first item on our agenda today is apologies for absence. Any apologies that have been notified to either the clerk or Phil? I'm not aware of any.
I've not received any.
No. Okay. Second item is declarations of interest. Would any of the members or indeed officers like to declare any interest in relation to items on the agenda today? Okay, the third item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting which were held on the 13th of November. First of all, any comments or questions either in terms of accuracy or substance in terms of the minutes? Not seeing any indications from members. I'll move them as a correct record. Are colleagues happy to prove them as correct record? If you just give me a show of your hands up. Yeah, I'm seeing that's unanimously approved in terms of the minutes. Item 4 is the closure of the areas for improvement from the 2019 HMIC FRS. That's Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary for Fire and Rescue Services inspection. And this is a report of the Chief Fire Officer. John, has this been introduced by you, or is Candida leading on this report?
Candida.
Over to you, Candida.
Okay. Right then, so this report is seeking approval for the closure of the final area for improvement that was assigned to this committee following the inspection in 2019. For completeness, the other two previously closed actions are also captured there in the table in the substance of the report, but I'll bring members immediately on to 2.4 in the report, where we're seeking to close action 13, which is around performance management and the framework. You'll see there the closure statement that outlines all of the actions that have been taken now to substantiate the closure of the action. And it essentially looks here both at the what, so the implementation of a performance management framework and process, along with some of the how, which is around the way in which we address this work. And what we're seeking to do is close this action now as a response to the inspection, but are very conscious that actually performance management is an ongoing thing, and embedding this further into the culture of the organisation is something that we'll be taking into year 3 strategic priorities for the service, and that's highlighted at paragraph 2.6. In summary, Chair, that would be all that I would say on this report, and would ask that recommendations are considered and approved.
Thank you very much, Candida, and thank you to not only you for the report, Candida, and the excellent work that's been going on in terms of dealing with the areas for improvement that arise from the inspection, but also, John, thank you to you as Chief Fire Officer and the entire team. I think the response to the report has been very good. You've listened to the feedback of elected members in terms of reporting through, obviously, COVID has meant that's come primarily through this committee, but I know some work before we hit the pandemic did go through the other committees, the Community Safety Committee, the Finance Committee and the HR Committee. But I think the report is self-explanatory, and as Candida says, the recommendations before us are to agree the closure of Area for Improvement 13 and to approve the reporting of the 3 areas for improvement aligned to the Policy and Strategy Committee as discharged. Are there any comments or questions in relation to this report that anybody wants to raise? Not seeing any indications, so I'll move the recommendations. Somebody happy to second the recommendations? See John indicating. I'm going to quickly go around the room in terms of the vote. I'll just ask for, against or abstention in terms of the recommendations, which we'll take on block. So myself, Councillor Michael Payne, Chair of the committee, for. Councillor Toby Neal? For. Thank you, Toby. Councillor Andrew Brown? For. Thanks, Andy. Councillor Sybil Fielding?
For.
Thank you, Sybil. Councillor John Clark? For. Thank you, John. And Councillor Jonathan Wheeler?
For.
Thank you, Jonathan. So those recommendations are unanimously approved. The next item on the agenda is item 5, which is Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services State of Fire Report, which obviously is conducted by Sir Tom Windsor. Although, John, is Sir Tom Windsor stepping down from his role? I certainly know that we've lost the local inspector, haven't we? There's going to be a change of hands in terms of the person who's locally linked with us. Is Tom Windsor standing down, or is he staying in the role, John?
I've not heard anything to confirm he's standing down. I do know HMI Zoe Billingham will be standing down in September, and there's a current process ongoing to determine a replacement. I'm not sure when the outcome of that will be. I know it's ongoing now, but as far as I'm aware, Tom Windsor is remaining the chief HMI.
Okay. John, are you going to introduce this report, or is this
Candida as well?
Candida again? Over to you, Candida.
Isn't me again. So the purpose of this report is to highlight the key points that were made in the second State of Fire report that was recently published. And it gives information as well in terms of how we as a service are engaged in responding to some of the issues that have been raised, both in the first report and the second report. Members will recall that the first report was published in January last year and was reported to the authority shortly after. In this second report, there are some positives and there are some things that Sir Tom is outlining as still very relevant in terms of improvement that he wants to see across the sector. So the positives really is significant recognition of the contribution that the fire sector has played in terms of the COVID response and their ability to continue providing services in their core responsibilities alongside enhancing the overall response across partners. And so he does give some recognition to that, which is positive. However, he also recognises that COVID has probably caused some delays in the work that he had set out as needed to be done in his first report. So at 2.5 in the report, we're highlighting the recommendations that were previously made and the progress that has or hasn't yet been made against them. And what he is saying is that these recommendations remain current until they're actually resolved, and they will be his ongoing priority. What you'll see is that predominantly the response to these are for the sector at a national level, and some of this will be resolved through work that is going on either through the NGC or the NJC, or from reform that will be coming forward from the Home Office. We're not entirely sure exactly when that might be, but it's potentially imminent. So the Home Office, LGA, NFCC and trade unions are all working together on these recommendations. What we've also done is just wanted to highlight the work or the position that we're in locally, because some of the negative way that the sector has been judged and perceived through the work that's been going on in HMI and through Sir Tom's report isn't necessarily how it how we would see it reflected locally with our local position. And we've been actively engaged in working on some of the national agenda around both practice and also about embracing the cultural shift that is a key priority for the Inspectorate and for Sir Tom. And those are highlighted in paragraphs 2.11 to 2.15. So those would be the key points that I would want to raise today. There may be some questions, which of course we'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much, Candida. And there's certainly lots of food for thought, I think, as there always is in the State of Fire report. And certainly, I think sometimes creates more questions than maybe it gives answers. Andy, you wanted to come in, I think.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, that's a bit better, Andy. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's just a quick observation or maybe a question on 2.5 on the second paragraph, where it states the government should change the law to give Chief Fire Officer operational independence, which he put in place before the pandemic could have helped them deploy firefighters more quickly. Now, I've got nothing against that, but would that take away decisions that we normally would be making with group leaders? You know, we set up that little group to make the decisions as a special case, whatever we called it, during the pandemic. Would that stop and give the power straight to the chief, or would that still go through the fire authority?
Thanks, Andy. Candida, do you want to say something? Then John may want to give his reflection.
I think probably it's worth John coming straight in on that point.
Yeah, to be honest, Andy, I think we're not really clear about what that means. I think what government want to see is a defined line between policy and then deployment. And that's what they want to see. And ultimately, as chief officer, I'm an advisor to the authority because, as you're aware, you carry all of the responsibility, and they want to see some of that responsibility for the discharge of operational decisions to sit with chief officers. Now, that's how it works within policing, in that the chief constable is operationally accountable. But in reality, even in policing, it's a consultative approach between operational leaders and policy makers, and I don't see how that would particularly change. I also think when you look at this locally, I think in Nottinghamshire we have a very good and clear scheme of delegation, and it's very clear to me where my responsibility in decision making ends and where yours as policymakers start, and that's very clear. And we have the governance in place to ensure that when we're at that line, we understand how to discharge those decisions and where advice ends up in policy, if you like. So we've done that through our group leaders and those routes. That's not universal across the sector, and it can be very, very different than what ours is. So it's one of those things which is identified in a national report, which doesn't necessarily reflect to create any great deal of problems here. But from me as an operational officer, even if I have operational independence, the reality of it is I would still be a servant of the public, and it's important the public have a say on those policies which drive the operational organisation. So I think it could be a moot point, but it is also quite an important point. And for me, it's about establishing clarity between what the operational decisions are and what the policy ones are. And I think we have that balance quite well here. Members are very interested, rightly so, in what we're doing in a policy sense. And likewise, you trust me to get on and deliver in an operational context. So, you know, I don't know as we'll feel much different here if I was to be given operational independence. That's the best I can say, but we'll have to see what comes through in the white paper.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, John. I just thought over the pandemic, the way we've operated, I thought it worked very well. You know, and the way things have been dealt with and democratically as well, and information shared, and I think it worked well. And so let's hope it may continue. Maybe the national, the rest of the nation should take note of what we've done in Nottinghamshire, John.
I think that's right, Andy. And you know, I'd just add from the authorities' perspective, there is a danger here with Sir Tom Windsor's, I think sometimes deliberately ruffling of the feathers on controversial issues, that we end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And actually the answer he's giving is the wrong answer to a different question. So this looks to me like a frustration from Tom Windsor with some of the issues around the NJC, and maybe the NJC wanting to get involved in very minutiae detail throughout the pandemic. And the answer for him there being, give chief fire officers operational independence. But my own view is pluralistic democracy and accountability shouldn't get in the way of John being able to do his day job. And actually it hasn't here in Nottinghamshire because of what you said, Andy. People always have respected that John and his colleagues have got a day job to do, and we respect their professional judgment. But I also think it's right and appropriate that we reflect the views of the community, the concerns of the community, and the questions the community might have to make sure that trust is maintained. And I just think this pandemic's proved that actually having a range of voices from different communities, different backgrounds, different political voices as well with a small p, has actually been all to the good for the fire service. And I think proves that, going one way and giving chief fire officers full, complete independence separate from accountability to the community, I think would be a mistake. But going down the line of giving all the power to one person, as they have done with police and crime commissioners, is also a mistake, because you can politicise an emergency service. Whereas here, I think the fact you've got a number of voices from different backgrounds, by and large, prevents that from happening. And I think you're right, Andy, it is all about relationships. I think perhaps where it's gone wrong elsewhere in the country is where people don't respect the professional advice of the chief fire officer and the experience that John and his senior colleagues bring to the table. And I think we were all very clear as group officers, yourself, me, Toby and others, that from the outset, we were going to follow John's advice, his professional advice, his experience, his team's professional advice and experience. And we would simply try and reflect the questions we were being posed and thoughts that were being posed to us from the community. So let's see where all of that gets, to. Any other comments or questions on the report, Toby?
Yeah, just a quick comment on what's been said there, and then I've just got a couple of questions. I do have some problems with that operational independence statement there for a number of reasons, but it's taken the police down a route that I'm not sure has been best served by the communities, but also I think it misunderstands the fundamental difference between police and fire services. We're not a demand-led service like the police. There is a preventive element. There needs to be some serious consideration about the planning that goes on, the preventative nature of what we do. So the role that everybody plays, I think, is really important. But I think John's absolutely right. The model here works really well. So don't want to read too much into this report because it's a big macro report about stuff. But just on that, I just want to ask a couple of questions about a couple of things. It talks about the ethics, code of ethics of fire and rescue, and it makes reference to toxic cultures. So my interest in this and in terms of it also, I seem to recall and it says it in here about lack of diversity within it. And I just want to reflect that on what's happening with this fire authority and this fire service, because I know it's a point of discussion that we've had and there has been significant changes to it. So how do you see, either Candida or John, how do you see our positioning in terms of that code of ethics and toxic culture, what's going on here, and the issues around recruitment and diversity? And how do we, I think we're ahead of the game a bit here, but I could be just, having nice visions of what we are. Tell me I'm wrong if you want. But how does the bigger picture argument here that he's making in this report relate to what our concerns are as a local fire authority?
Yeah, I think it'd be fair to say it's still a challenge. Let's be clear about that. And we certainly can't be complacent. But at the same time, over the last few years, we've put a lot of energy into driving the inclusion agenda within the service, which about 5 years ago started with a refresh of our values. We've now deployed a behavioural framework around our values, which are in line with the code of ethics, which have actually now been published. So the code of ethics are now in place, and our behavioural framework, we've just launched the behavioural framework to further the values that we have in place, so our 4 principal values, and all of the behavioural framework draws the values and the code of ethics together. So they're based on Nolan principles, as you'd expect in public service, and it talks about positive and negative indicators. So we use those behavioural frameworks in our selection, recruitment, progression. So it becomes more embedded, as well as leading conversations within teams around how we should behave at work and within communities. So that's the work ongoing. You'll be aware we'd not recruited for a number of years because of austerity, but over the last couple of years, we've done 2 recruitment drives. The first one was done a couple of years ago when we got something like 25% female firefighters in that, and just over 20% from ethnic minority groups as well. So that doubled the figures we'd previously achieved. And we've ran another recruitment campaign. In fact, trainees started just this week on that course, only for a couple of dozen members of staff, not huge numbers. But again, we've got around 20% representation from underrepresented groups. So we're making strong inroads into that, but we've still got a long way to go. I think the toxic culture, I think some of that, if unfortunately on social media it raises its head, which it's clearly from fire and rescue service staff over you know, some of the challenges we face. Some of that even played out when the State of Fire report was published. So, you know, it's easy to make an obvious national position that there is some toxic culture within the sector. And I think we acknowledge that as well. And we've worked hard with our staff around staff engagement, particularly with our middle managers in engagement with staff, to try and remove some of those issues. I also think we have to acknowledge that change within the sector is sometimes reflected as being almost harassment, and really we're really talking about leading change. So we've done a lot of work around change management, and people sometimes feel disaffected at work because things are happening around them that they don't like. Well, unfortunately, that's progress that we have to make within the service. But the other thing we do here is every 2 years, regardless of what's going on in the organisation, we run a staff survey. And one staff survey in itself is not really that helpful. But what we've done now over the last 3, we've seen a marked change in the confidence staff have got in not only senior managers, but also middle managers, and particularly within their teams. And we've seen a marked increase. I think the last staff survey we ran was right in the middle of COVID last year, and virtually every indicator shifted positively, in that people were happier, more confident, less signs of harassment and bullying in the workplace, what they'd seen. There's still small numbers there, but less than what we'd seen in previous years. So we are trying to drive that agenda from within, but at the same time, we're not complacent about it either. So hopefully making good progress, but there is certainly a lot of work to be done within the sector to become a truly inclusive organisation, not only in terms of workforce, but also community, and ensuring we're delivering an inclusive delivery to all of our communities as well.
That's great. Could I just come back on something then? Just so that, I mean, that sounds great, and that puts it all in context of. So the question around that I would have around this is, what further things do we as the fire authority members working with you need to be concentrating on in the context of this report and the recommendations that exist, the previous recommendations that exist there?
I think for me, the visibility from members has been really good. So some of the diverse groups that Michael's hosted, they have reflected really, really positive, and members' engagement in that is positive. As well as greater member engagement with staff in the rounds, and you know, some of you have accompanied on section and station visits. All of that is good. So I think championing the cause and raising the profile, so there's a visibility there. I think the other bit is overtly holding me to account to make sure that we're delivering against that. And so, you know, even having the discussion in this meeting does that, because I think, you know, there is more for us to do. And I suppose finally, as councillors through the LGA, is to engage at the national level in the work, what needs to be done at the national level as well. I see Candida's hand is in the air.
If that's all right, Chair. Yeah, I would just add to that as well, the role as local councillors in giving that view of the fire service to communities who you have that contact with that we don't in the same way, that the fire service is somewhere that they potentially could be part of, that they could be working, and that there are a range of roles within it, not just the frontline firefighting element, and that because you can reach people sometimes in a way that we can't.
Any other questions or comments on this? Not seeing anybody else indicating. So the recommendations are turn to the right page. The members note the update provided by Candida and the Chief Fire Officer on the State Fire Report. People happy to note the report? Okay, item 6 on the agenda is the collaboration update. Candida again for the hat trick.
Yes, this is a report I'm particularly pleased to bring. It gives an update to members of the current situation with regard to our collaboration work. It focuses very heavily on detail around our joint HQ project, which is well underway, going to plan, and you'll see there a range of detail about the particular strands. The one that I would highlight is around paragraph 2.5 around human resources and people. A lot of focus, quite rightly, has been on the bricks and mortar elements of this project, but actually buildings are only great if they're populated by a happy workforce, and that work is now well underway, and we're holding a series of events and ongoing work behind the scenes, including employee forums and a range of things to get good collaborative working. What I'd highlight as well is that there is a lot of other work that is beyond the remit of us working collaboratively with the police. What we haven't highlighted in here is all of the work that has gone on over the past year in response to COVID and how we've worked in partnership very comprehensively and above and beyond in many instances in a collaborative way with partners across the piece, including health. But that will be coming forward in a further report to authority later on in the year. To give a kind of debrief and summary of all of that response. But there is other work as well. So highlighted from paragraph 2.15, the joint fire control that we have with Derbyshire continues, and there is actually a collaboration board involving members that meets regularly. It hasn't met during these latest round of lockdowns, but again, soon after the AGM, that'll be something that'll be happening. So that's another area where we're working with our partner fire service. And again, you can see there that there is work that's happening with local authorities. Particularly, I'd highlight the work that's going on in the city with the JATES. And this remains a priority for us, firmly situated as one of our year 3 priorities in our delivery of our plan. And in summary, Chair, that would be what I would highlight from this report.
Thank you very much, Candida. The recommendations, I'll come to John in a moment, are that we note the contents of the report and agree to receive a revised collaboration framework for approval in spring 2022. And certainly I'd just like to say that I think the superb work that's been going on over a number of years in collaboration is excellent. And I think it speaks to something that Andy was referring to earlier. Why do you need to rearrange the deck chairs and the governance when actually there's already amazing work going on between the two organisations and strong relationships, both at a political level and an officer professional level as well? John?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's just really bringing attention to page 23 and the decant from Bestwood Lodge, and making sure we've absolutely keyed into getting the pricing right on this. I may have mentioned it before, and I'm going to mention it again. As chair of the police authority, years ago, we got the training college, which was being sold. I had some bright spark turn up and say it was 450,000 for that, subsequently sold for getting on for nearly £6 million. And at the moment, the rate of real estate in that is accelerating at such a cost that we need to be absolutely clued into it, because there will be legal challenges. I'm no threat, but I'll certainly be watching it like a hawk, because having seen this in action before, had it not been for the fact as chairing that authority, that police training college would have gone for 450,000, and I say subsequently sold for 5.5 million, I think they're all just over. Thanks, Chair. Thanks,
John. Candida?
Yeah, just to respond to that, I'd just like to offer reassurance that we are absolutely on it in terms of this, and we'll be looking for full market value for that site.
Good.
Thank you, Candida. Any other comments or questions on this one?
Jonathan, Scott.
Thanks, Chairman. I just want to talk about West Bridgeford Fire and Police Station. So I've spoken to local police officers and to some of our team there as well from the Fire Authority, and they're all really positive about what's gone on there. And I think it was a really positive approach from the start and working. Obviously, you do get the initial there's people coming to our station, what have you, but actually they really got on well. And a lot of good work there, and it seems to be working well for the community, which ultimately is the whole point of doing it, as well as saving money. So I just want to say thanks to everyone who's involved in that, because it's really going well for both services, and I say for the community of West Bridgford and Rushcliffe as a whole.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thanks for your support as well for the work that's been going on there as a local member. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to move the recommendations. I will just go round because there is a recommendation to agree to receive a revised collaboration framework. So myself, Councillor Michael Payne, Chair of the committee, 4. Councillor Toby Neal.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Brown.
4.
Councillor Sybil Fielding.
4.
Councillor John Clark.
4.
And Councillor Jonathan Wheeler.
4.
Thank you very much. That those recommendations are agreed unanimously. So item 7 is to exclude the exclusion of the public, which is to consider excluding the public from the meeting during the consideration of the remaining items, which is one item in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under Schedule 12A Part 1 Paragraph 3, on the basis that, having regard to all the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So I'll move that. People are happy to support that recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, so I'll